Just you and I, let's just get for this rush. We don't need that much, just love. The whole country is just so different than the United States. One of the things we really learned out is patience. Everything there is like you wait your turn, you don't skip lines, you don't, cut in front of people. Everything is just so orderly, and the level of respect is just on another level. We were honestly really blown away by that. Noticing this was mostly in the metro station where we would get the train every day. Everyone on the escalators go up, they wait on the left side if you're going to stand, and if you want to run up, you go on the right side, and everyone knows that. It's like a rule, and no one breaks it. And also, even though, like, the metros, when you're actually on the train, it was really, really packed, no one's, like, shoving and stuff. Like, it's just common knowledge to just respect the person next to you without even having to say it. Another thing we learned was how underrated it is to have fun by yourself. Like, everything there is, you can have so much fun just going out by yourself. Like, there's no shame in eating alone. There's no shame in going out and having fun by yourself, because everyone there seems to have fun by themselves. Like, all I would see is just people by themselves eating. And the way, everything's ordered there in the restaurants, it's totally different than here. And it just really makes you think, like, damn, like, I could have fun by myself too. Like, I don't need to be in a group all the time, or I can go out to eat if I want to by myself. Like, we don't really think about that in the United States, and it's so different. And it kind of sucks because it's kind of looked down upon. But when you're over there, you're just kind of like, this is just normal. Like, someone's just going out to eat. You gotta be with somebody all the time, So those are the two main things that we learned on this trip, is patience, and also, just being on your own, having fun, making the best of your time.
The most impactful experiences of my Tokyo trip involved 2 university lectures that we attended. The first one was talking about barrier-free Japan. In Tokyo and many areas of Japan, we noticed when we were walking around that oftentimes there wasn't any accessible options. For example, if you were in a wheelchair and you needed to take the subway, you only had one entrance to go through, whereas there's multiple entrances throughout the city. I didn't notice the entrance in the wheelchair until someone brought it up to me, and I was confused, wondering what would someone with a wheelchair or crutches do. Additionally, on the subway, there isn't elevators for every station. So for me, I thought that was very concerning, because I thought to myself, what if someone needs the elevator? What if someone can't climb up the stairs or the escalator? So these thoughts entered my mind, and I thought to myself, what would someone else do if they weren't able to walk? Our first lecture was a musician who was actually in crutches from her muscular dystrophy, and she was talking about the lack of disability services, and she was part of an organization called Barrier Free Japan. And for me, watching her go up that steep hill in Imperial Park with her crutches really just stopped me and made me realize how grateful I should be that I am able to climb up such a hill with no issues whatsoever, whereas this young woman has to go up all by herself in the crutches since there's no railing, there's no elevator, and there was no one there to help her. She mentioned how, compared to her other experiences in foreign countries, that in other countries people were willing to help her, like saying, hey, the elevator is right there, or hey, I can help you go up this hill, but in Japan, no such services exist. Compared to the United States and the American Disabilities Act, Japan has no such official policy. The second thing that I noticed was the lack of mental health services in Japan. There was only one English-speaking organization called TEL to help Japanese citizens who only spoke English. While it's a great start, I feel that Japan really needs more for mental health, since a lot of the population is still suffering from PTSD from the Fukushima earthquake and nuclear reactor. Thank you very much.
We don't need that much. Just love. We can spend the whole night in each other's arms if you want to. We don't need that much. Just love. We don't need love, but you don't know if you want to. So let's start. Just you and I. You and I. Let's get go on. For the sunrise, yeah. We don't need that much. Just love. We can spend the whole night with each other if you want to.
Tokyo, Japan has a universal healthcare system, and in regards to people with disabilities, the overall system tries to include them in society. However, culturally, this hasn't worked out very well. Japan has a very long history, and part of what's come with that history is a bit of discrimination from other people and also people with disabilities. The Barrier-Free Association in Japan is similar to our disabilities here in the States, and the association works to get laws passed to help people with disabilities to be inclusive in the society. So although laws have been passed, people themselves haven't culturally been inclusive in society. So one speaker we had, which was, made a very strong impression, is Aoyaka, and that she has muscular dystrophy, and she also goes around and sings and tries to bring awareness of the troubles and the challenges they have of mainly being included in society and also in just planning. For example, a lot of what she's advocating for is access or reduction of barriers to facilitate people with disabilities attending the Olympics in 2020. So culturally, they're still kind of on the outside. As far as laws have gone, they have made progress. And for example, I witnessed myself on the train station where a person in a wheelchair, as they were getting on the train, there was someone there to put a ramp down for them to get on the train, and also there was someone on standby once they reached their stop to put a ramp down so they could get off the train. Another law that they have on the books is that the workforce or employers are required to hire 2% of their workforce with people with disabilities. So I thought that was pretty interesting and pretty good invention, and also contrast with here where there is no such law. And that's what I would like to share with the class. Thank you.
Tell me, when the last time you felt like this? Tell me, when the last time you've been held like this? Tell me, when the last time you've loved like this? Or have you at all? Say you pushed away, and you don't even know why you gotta act like that, baby. No, your heart's so froze.
The first things were obvious, like they drive on the opposite side of the road, and that their culture is very quiet and reserved compared to Americans. And then there was things that were a little less obvious. Like, I noticed when I first arrived there that it was very clean and there was very little trash on the streets compared to America. And I didn't even see trash or recycle bins for the most part anywhere. I would see it maybe one time a day, and I would unload all my trash into that bin. Another thing was that their society is very collective as opposed to individualistic like it is here in America. Everybody follows the rules and laws. I didn't see anybody jaywalk or litter. Or an example is I went to a restaurant, and outside of the restaurant there was a row of bikes parked outside, and none of them had a lock on it, which is really impressive to me because in America we would expect somebody to steal our bike, but over there it's understood that nobody would steal their bikes. Their main form of transportation was the subway, which is more akin to the East Coast as opposed to the West Coast where everybody drives and has a car. They walk a lot, I noticed that, and which is probably why they have a lower obesity rate than people in America. Another thing I noticed was how introverted the Japanese society is. For example, there's a lot of factors that limit human contact within the Japanese society. There's a lot of vending machines, so you can get pretty much any drink or food from a vending machine. A lot of restaurants had stalls where the other person sitting next to you or across from you couldn't see you eating, which is very different than here in America. Waiters did never bother you while you were sitting at a table. You would press a button to call them over. And lastly, one of the most important differences I saw between American society and Japanese society was how they view disabled people and how they treat disabled people. In Japan, handicapped people are looked down upon very negatively by society as a whole, as opposed to America, where we're a lot more progressive with the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which became a law in 1990, which stops Americans or anyone, employers or people in the transportation industry, from discriminating against handicapped people, as opposed to Japan, where they do not have a law like this at all. And we even spoke to a couple of handicapped people and their barriers that they face every day trying to fit into Japanese society.
How you feel, baby? Oh, how you feel? Just keep it real, baby. Oh, just keep it real, baby. You ready? Cause you jump, that I jump. You fall, that I fall. When you jump, I jump. When I fall, you fall. Oh, no, 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 no.
There's a lot of differences between Japan and the United States, and I don't think that was at all surprising to anyone that went over there on this trip. There are some similarities between the two countries that some people may have found a little bit surprising. First of all, there's American corporations all over Japan. There's Starbucks or McDonald's on every corner. You see a lot of 7-Elevens and Lawson's stores, just like you do in the United States. I think that Japan values their technology just like we do in the United States. Everyone had a smartphone or iPhone, and everyone was on it pretty much all the time, much like many of the people in the United States are. I think that the business culture between both the United States and Japan is very similar. I think both countries work very hard, and they kind of have a work before play mentality. People take the business culture extremely seriously in both countries. I think that the higher education in Japan and in the United States is comparable. The University of Tokyo was really a good example of a prestigious university in Japan that we went and visited. They're doing really high quality research, and just from the couple lectures that we had from their professors, you could tell that it was a really, really high quality institute.
When I fall, you fall.